And welcome back. We have a 2014 Toyota Corolla, and we're going to go ahead and get the front brakes done. I'm going to be lifting up the car right here from the subframe. It's a pretty safe and strong part to lift the car up from. As you can see on the other side, I already have a jack stand. So make sure you use jack stands whenever lifting up a car. Do not rely on the floor jack. They're not very safe at all. Now if you don't have an impact gun, you want to make sure that you loosen the lug nuts before you even lift up the car. At this point, if you get in the car and turn the wheel all the way to the left, or if you're working on the right side of the car, you would want to turn the wheel all the way to the right, and it's just basically going to give you better access to the back of the caliper so you can get to the bolt. To make the caliper easier to remove, you could use a flathead screwdriver and just jam it in here, and you want to pry against the rotor, and it's basically going to compress the piston inside of the caliper. The caliper is held on to the bracket with two bolts, but we only need to remove the lower bolt because what we're going to end up doing is rotating the caliper upward, and it'll give us access to the pads. Now we're going to remove the caliper from the bracket, but we're not going to remove that top bolt. We're just going to slide out the slide pin, and basically you just pull it back on the rubber boot and it'll let the pin slide right out. And here I am using a hook that's designed to hold calipers, but you could use anything, anywhere from zip ties to string, wire, it doesn't matter. Just hold the caliper up. You don't want it hanging on the rubber brake line. And now we can remove the two bolts holding the bracket onto the knuckle. Now if you're not changing your brake rotors, you do not have to take this bracket off. This bracket, it only needs to come off whenever you're changing your brake pads and your rotors. Now to get the rotor off, sometimes they just come right off. I've had that happen to me. Other times I've had to use a hammer, and you hit it from the back side of the rotor and just kind of work your way all the way around it. Don't go too crazy with the hammer though. But definitely the easiest method is to get the right fastener or the bolt that threads right into the hat of the rotor, and it's actually designed to press against the hub, and as you can see how easily it works to remove the rotor. Now as you can see, this rotor looks halfway decent on the outside, but if you look on the back side, you can see that it's completely destroyed. So if you were ever to look past your rims and you look at your rotor, that's not a good indication of the condition of your rotors. You always want to check the backside. Now this hub right here is relatively clean, so that's why I just hit it up with some brake parts cleaner, and now I'm putting anti-seize on it. But normally you would find a lot of rust on this thing, and what you want to do is just come at it with a wire wheel, a wire brush, and just try to get as much rust off of it as you can. Okay, so now we have to clean the rotors because they do come with oil on them, and that's pretty much to prevent them from rusting. Now I'm going to be using brake parts cleaner, but you could just as well use soap and water. I've used it plenty of times and it works just as good. The only time you don't have to clean a rotor is whenever they're painted, and it's usually like a flat black, but those are premium rotors and they tend to cost more. Here's just a helpful tip: whenever you put the rotor on, grab one of your lug nuts and thread it onto one of the lower studs. It's basically just going to hold the rotor nice and flat, so when it comes down to putting the caliper bracket back on, it's going to go on much easier. Now if you bought some decent brake pads, they should come with new brake hardware, which is basically these clips that I'm taking off right here. So normally you would always want to replace these, but if you did buy the economy brake pads, they usually don't include these clips. So at that point you would just have to remove them and clean them off with some sort of wire brush, and just try to get them as clean as you can and put them back on. Now here you can see the surface rust that's on the caliper bracket, and I'm just going to go ahead and clean it up with a file. Now this file is not aggressive at all, it's a very fine one, and it's only going to take off the surface rust. You don't want to take any of the material off of the bracket itself. I'm applying this synthetic grease right onto the caliper bracket. It's going to go on before the clips do, and it's basically just to prevent that rust that we just cleaned off. After you're done with all of this, you go ahead and put your clips back on. Now make sure you're putting them on the correct way, because I believe you can put them on backwards or upside down. I'm not really sure which way it would be. I guess it would be upside down or inside out. I'm not really sure, but the point is you could get them wrong. Once you got your clips on, make sure you clean off any excess grease that squeezes out. You definitely do not want that on the rotor. I'm applying blue thread locker to all of the bolts that have to do with the brake component. You definitely do not want any of these bolts backing out or coming loose while you're driving. So the blue thread locker is just a little bit of added security. Now you definitely want to get these bolts nice and tight, but the best thing to do is just torque them down to factory specifications. Because we have a brand new rotor and new brake pads, the way the piston is extended on the caliper, it's never going to fit. So you have to compress the piston inside of the caliper. I'm using this special tool here that's designed for this, but you could also use a large set of channel lock pliers or even a large C-clamp. Either one is going to work and get the job done. Now your caliper has to slide back and forth on the slide pins, and they play a big role on how your brake pads and rotor are going to wear down. So obviously you want them to work as smoothly as possible. If any of them are seized up inside of the bore of the caliper bracket, you want to take care of that right now. Now this top one right here where I'm putting the grease on it right now, it was actually okay, but it's not a bad idea to take the old grease off and apply some fresh grease. But the lower slide pin was actually seized up, and I did have to kind of fight with it a little bit to get it out. I cleaned it up, put fresh grease, and it was working great after that. And now it's time to put the brake pads on. Now these things are gonna slide in just perfectly. If they feel like they're too tight and they can't go in, I mean, have you ever seen anyone use a hammer to put brake pads on? Well, I have, and if someone has to use a hammer to put brake pads on, something is not right. They should slide in with very minimal drag. I mean, it has a distinct feel to it, but you shouldn't need any tools or any type of hammering to get them on. Now, whether you're ready to do the brakes on the other side, or if you're ready to take the car for a test drive, make sure you get in and push the brake pedal a few times just to get pressure back before you even start up the car. So that's it. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're considering subscribing, don't forget to hit that notification bell. And like always, thanks for watching.